The senator from Illinois.
Madam President, I could stay here all day listing the names of the braver than brave men and women who I was lucky enough to serve with in the military. I could stay here all night telling stories about their heroism and courage. I could stay here all week, all month, talking about the troops serving overseas right now, about those who are on their 8th or 9th tours of duty, or about those teenagers who weren't even alive when the Twin Towers fell, yet who are ready to ship off to Afghanistan this very moment if that's what asked of them. I could go on and on all year if I wanted, and I still would not be able to convey the sacrifices they're making because they love this country and would do anything to defend her. I will not stand idly by and let a single one of them shed blood in an avoidable conflict because Donald Trump has abdicated matters of war and peace to a despot who regularly flouts basic human rights and openly murders journalists. And yet, after tensions spiked between Saudi Arabia and Iran this past weekend, that's exactly what he seemed willing to do, tweeting that the US was locked and loaded, just waiting for the Crown Prince to tell him how to proceed. We can't let that slip by. The president, the commander-in-chief of the greatest military, of the greatest democracy on the face of the earth, just suggested that he was outsourcing the powers of war to a foreign monarch, powers that aren't even his to hand over. And he did it in a tweet. But while Trump may have never read the Constitution, I have. So let me direct his attention to Article 1, which makes it clear that the president does not have the authority to declare war. Only Congress has that power. We are the ones tasked with deciding when and how Americans are sent into combat. We are the ones charged with that most solemn duty, not Donald Trump, and certainly not Mohammed bin Salman. Yet Trump is acting as if Article 1 simply doesn't exist, as if he could just usurp this power from the legislative branch and trade it to whomever he pleases, as if obeying the Constitution is optional, even while he tweets that he's willing to obey a foreign prince. This should not be a partisan issue. No matter if you're struggling to pay rent or if your name is plastered in gold on the front of a building on Fifth Avenue, no one can overrule the Constitution. Trump doesn't get to mire us in yet another Middle East conflict just because he has a bizarre tendency to bow down and kiss up to the world's cruelest tyrants. Whether you ask a constitutional scholar or a high school student taking US history classes, they'll tell you the same thing, that on matters of military force, American presidents do not get to choose to take orders from foreign leaders, whether they are our allies or adversaries. They take directions from Congress, full stop. And I'm here today to say that we have not authorized him to ensnare us in another endless, senseless war. We haven't debated and passed a new authorization for the use of military force in more than 15 years, and there's just no way that the AUMF passed to go after the perpetrators of 9/11 can justify military actions against Iran nearly 2 decades later, sending troops overseas who may not have even been alive when that AUMF was voted on. But listen, it's not just me who believes this. It's not just my fellow Democrats in the Senate either. During the confirmation hearing for now Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, I asked Trump's own nominee point blank whether the existing AUMFs give this administration the right to conduct a war with Iran. And his answer? Well, his answer was no. No, they do not. Even in decades past, when prior presidents have gotten us tangled in bad wars based on bad intelligence, at the very least, they made sure to loop in the United Nations. But Trump's acting as if he wouldn't even do that. He's too busy thumping his chest and catering to the whims of autocrats. He's too infatuated with maximum pressure to consider even minimum diplomacy, too distracted beating the drums of war to even think about how many troops he'd be sending into harm's way. And for what? To protect the Saudi oil industry or the Crown Prince's personal profits? Once again, the Trump foreign policy doctrine has proven reckless, senseless, and dangerous, full of gaslighting and bluster, a doctrine in which fact and fiction are one and the same. It's shameful. It's terrifying that we have a commander-in-chief who comes to military decisions by virtue of temper tantrum and then announces them via tweet. A president who doesn't seem to care that if he keeps on the path of fire and fury that he's been treading, our own homeland will be in greater danger. More wounded warriors will be sent to Walter Reed, and more fallen heroes will be laid to rest in the hallowed grounds of Arlington. Donald Trump may never have deigned to put on our nation's uniform. So he probably doesn't know that the commander's greatest responsibilities is to safeguard the troops so they are able to carry out the mission. That means we do not send them into harm's way recklessly and without full support, both logistically and legally. As a former unit commander, I ran for Congress so that when the drums of war sounded, I would be in a position to make sure that our elected officials fully consider the true cost of war, not just in dollars and cents, but in the sacrifices of our troops and their families. That was the vow I made to my buddies that I deployed with and all those who've served since I hung up my uniform. Now, as the drums of war are pounding once again, I'm here today to keep my promise to do our troops justice and to make sure that Donald Trump does not outsource overseas yet another American job, Congress's job to declare war. So if the Trump administration wants to go to war, they must bring their case to Congress and give the American people a say through their elected representatives. They must respect our service members enough to prove why war with Iran is worth turning more moms and dads into Gold Star parents. And they must testify about what the end state in Iran actually looks like. Then, when their case has been made, when Congress's debate is done, we should vote. It's our duty. It's the least we owe to the troops we'd be sending into harm's way. And you know, if the vote to authorize military force passes, then I will be the first person to volunteer to deploy. I'm ready to pack my rucksack, to dust off my uniform. I'm ready to fly helicopters, take on the grunt work, do whatever else it takes to uphold that oath that all service members and veterans have sworn, to protect and defend this nation we love, no matter what. It would be nice if we had a president willing to do the same, instead of one who thinks he looks tough by pushing us to the brink of a needless conflict. Because listen, Trump may think he comes off as strong by using phrases like lock and loaded, and by spewing threats 280 characters at a time, but he's never seemed weaker to me. A real commander-in-chief wouldn't dole out matters of war to the highest bidder. A true leader would not bend to the whims of despots just because of the size of their bank accounts. A strong president would not care more about keeping tyrants happy than safeguarding our most precious resource, the brave men and women willing to lay down their lives to defend our nation. Yet, day after day, Donald Trump wraps himself in the flag in the morning, then abandons our service members and our democratic norms by the afternoon. And while he may have already shirked his duty as an elected official, I refuse to abandon mine. So as many times as is necessary, I'm going to keep coming back to this chamber, keep raising my voice under this great Capitol dome, and keep demanding what's actually in our nation's best interest. Because you see, I don't take my orders from war criminals or dictators or princes or monarchs. I don't serve foreign regimes. I serve the American people. Trump would do well to try that sometime. And with that, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.